Hello and welcome to another Retfurb video. On today's video we're looking at this Super Nintendo and we're going to try and restore it back to the original condition. Unfortunately you'll see as we go on what can happen if it all goes wrong with this sort of process. Now what I will say before we get into the video, I've done this numerous times on other systems, exactly the same process and never had any issues. Not done it on a Super Nintendo before, or a normal NES. I've done it on Game Boys, never had an issue, Dreamcasts, and not had a problem with it. But as you'll see, there's an issue with this one. So I'll show you the process as usual and what I did to sort it out and make it look better than what it was. So the first thing we need to do is just disassemble everything. So we're going to do the console and the controller, starting first with stripping down the console. With the console it requires a special tool to remove it. You'll see that on here that I'm showing up to the camera now. These can be purchased online easily. If you put in Super Nintendo tool, they'll come up. There's a total of 6 screws that hold the bottom of the casing to the top casing, which are the special type screws. So these just need to be removed and then the casings can be separated. So ideally I've just lifted that off incorrectly. You want to turn it back over, put it on its feet, and then lift the top off. It'll just make it easier when you do it. No big deal, but it's just a better way of doing it. So now that the lid's removed, we can look at removing all the inner parts, all the circuit board, any bits of trim, get this all separated so we can get it ready to restore. Now for all the inner parts, they're all held on with normal Phillips crosshead screws, so there's no special tools required now to remove any bits inside the console. This front panel part also needs to be restored because you can see it's quite discoloured, so I'm going to separate that from the backing piece and then that'll be easier to restore on its own. Now that the screws have been removed for this metal shield, that can also be lifted out and then we can look at removing the rest of the screws to get the circuit board out. So that's now the circuit board removed, and now we've got the lower piece which is all ready to have the refurbishment done on that. As you can see inside and the outside it's very yellow, it's obviously aged quite badly, these parts. Apparently there's something that's inside the plastic when they were made that does this, so we're hopefully going to reverse that. Like I said earlier, the normal process that I do that with normally goes fine, but you'll see the issues soon enough. Now just removing all the separate pieces that are on the upper part. So these are pretty much clipped in, most of them. I think there's one screw that holds in the part which locks the cartridge in place when it's in use. The main grey upper trim piece is just clipped in all around the edges, so you just need to work your way around that and just unclip those little clips and then it'll come out. Here I'm just giving all the small parts just a quick visual inspection, make sure there's not any sort of major damage on them. They seem to be okay, just a bit grubby. Again, you can see on this part, majorly discoloured. So now we move on to stripping down the controller. To be honest, it isn't that bad, to be fair. It's hardly any discoloration on it, but I thought while I'm doing the other one I might as well just do it. And it comes out fine, to be honest, because obviously it isn't that discoloured in the first place. 5 screws on the back and you can remove the rear casing. That's all that's holding it together, and then all the insides can come out after that. Now removing all the small plastic buttons. These will be cleaned up before it all goes back together. And that's it, all stripped ready for the restoration process. So with this, I'm using a hair peroxide, which again, like I said earlier, I've done this loads of times on other consoles, never had a single issue. So I'll show you the process that I normally go through. Obviously, caution's got to be taken when you're using these sort of products, with your hands, face, everything like that. So all I do is I put some clear film wrap down just the sort of stuff you use at home, just normal cling film. Put the parts on it, then just cover the parts using a brush in the peroxide, wrap it up, and then it goes out in the sun. And then this gets the process of restoring it back to the original colour. You can see I apply the peroxide cream quite liberally on the area, just make sure it's all covered, and now wrapping it up in the cling film. So now I'm just going to do exactly the same process on all the small parts, all the main parts of the shell. I'm not actually sure what happened with this console compared to other ones I've done. Maybe it's just some way that the Super Nintendo has been made. I did have a quick search online about other people that have had issues, and I see that the issue that I had is quite common. So had I read that before, I probably wouldn't have done it this way. Again, I've done Dreamcasts quite a few times, and I've done Nintendo Game Boys, and they're all fine. I would have thought the Game Boy probably would have been made from the same plastic as this, but I could be wrong. Now looking at this section that I'm doing now, it does make me cringe a bit, because now knowing what happened to it and what's caused it doing this, I wouldn't have done it, but there you go, you live and learn. I just hope that showing this video will just give someone a better idea of what they could expect doing it this way, and then if they want to take that risk and do it, then they can do, or try and find another method of restoring it. So now onto the final piece to cover the upper part. So again, same process involved. Now that all the parts have been covered in the peroxide and then wrapped in cling film, they can go outside. So now it's time to have a look and see how they're doing after the first coat. So you can see here straight away the colour difference from what they looked like before. So this is only one coat. I tend to probably do a couple of coats. I'll do this, wash it off, and then put another coat on it. But you can see here it looks a lot better just from the outside anyway. So I cleaned it off, it wasn't looking too bad, a little bit funny. Give it another coat, put it back out in the sun again, and now these are results of what it came out like. As you can see, the controller, absolutely fine. But unfortunately for the main shell, as you can see, not such a good result. Majorly mottled finish on there. I was tempted to try and give it another go, but I don't think it will sort it out. Both of the stickers underneath have now lost most of the text image, which is probably the biggest regret on the whole thing, because that's obviously got to be replicated. And the 4 rubber feet on the bottom, they've all gone really sticky now. So obviously that's had some sort of chemical reaction on it. So based on this, I wouldn't go down this route if I was you with a Super Nintendo, and I wouldn't do it again with a Super Nintendo. I'm just glad I didn't do the main logo part. Yes, it's a little bit discoloured, but I can live with that. So now I had to think of something else I could do to try and rectify this. So these are the results that I've got with another method. As you can see straight away from this, a lot more uniform colour. So what I actually did was to paint them with a plastic paint. Not ideal, I know, and to try and replicate the colour, it's hard, especially when you've got a discoloured front main panel with the logo on it. So matching up against that, it doesn't look 100%, but it looks pretty good to be fair. Obviously I've got to replace these decals that are on the underside, but as for just getting it back and making it look more presentable compared to what it was with the other method, this looks loads better, and I'm actually quite happy with it, to be honest. Once those decals underneath have been replaced, then it'll look quite good. Again, I would prefer it was all original and didn't have to do this, but as it was, I didn't really want to leave it like that. So now on to the fit of the console, just basically a reverse of what we did to strip it down, just making sure that we put all the screws and parts in the correct locations, because obviously some screws are slightly longer than the others, so this just needs to be obviously noted when you are stripping it down. So just going back to the finish with regards to painting the console, so basically all I did was just prepped it with a bit of Scotch-Brite, just a bit of fine Scotch-Brite on it, which would just give it a good key. And then I used an adhesion promoter over the outside, just dusted that over, which helps it grip to the plastic, and then used a plastic grey, which just gives almost like a matte satin finish. I wouldn't say it's really matte, and I wouldn't say it's too satin, it's just sort of in between, which does replicate the finish quite well. Obviously the original parts were probably a bit more shiny than what they would have been when they were new, because obviously with use and touching them and everything like that, but it's given it quite a good finish, as you can see. I know some people will probably think it's completely pointless to do any of the process. They would just leave it brown, just discoloured, and wouldn't worry about it, which is fine. You know, I get that, and to be honest, it's a lot less hassle. The peroxide, I wouldn't go down that route again. Painting it again, possibly. The only issue you've got, as I say, with the painting it is you can't paint that part where you got the Super Nintendo logo on unless you're going to try and replicate that with a sticker, but I wouldn't want to go down that route. So obviously underneath as well, you've got to mask up the sticker. Unless you replace them, you take them off first and paint it and replace them. So you could do it that way. So painting it is not 100% ideal either, really. It just depends what you want to try and achieve. I am also going to investigate a little bit further and see what other methods that people use. I have seen people using tanks of some sort of solution in there which do it. Again, I don't know what the sort of results are from that, but I will be looking further into other ideas. As you can see in the video, the console's almost put back together. There's just the 6 security screws that are underneath that just need to be done up, and then we can move on to putting the controller back together. Here I'm just making sure that all the buttons and the flap are just operating correctly and not sort of jammed from where I put it back together incorrectly. So as you can see, not a bad result, and now on to fitting the controller back up. So all the buttons and pads have all been cleaned, ready for reassembly. So just a quick check of the buttons, making sure they're all clicking down right, no sort of resistance there. And now we can put the 5 screws back in the back, and then the controller's all done. So just before I finish, I'm just going to give the controller lead a good clean. It's a bit grubby, obviously where hands have been touching it over the years. And that's it, the controller's all fitted up, the console's all done. As you can see, the controller's come up really well. Wasn't that bad to start with, but just with that little extra refresh, it's come up really nice. So obviously not the results I was hoping to achieve with the original peroxide method. Done it so many times, so I was quite surprised that it came out like this. But in the end, I managed to sort of bring it back and look as good as I could get it after that issue. So as you can see from the video at the moment, the front main piece with the logo on it is a little bit discoloured, but again, the colour that I finished the outer casing in might not be exactly as it was from the factory, and it probably isn't, but as it was, I don't think it's come out too bad considering. Overall, I'm happy that I managed to get it back like this, but I would have liked to have achieved it without doing it. But yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks again for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.